Well everyone, it's time for us to go and take a look at the M1 MacBook Pro and see how this particular MacBook holds up in 2024. Now, the thing I would definitely tell you about these particular MacBooks is that, one, I still think they're completely worth buying for pretty much every single person out there, but the successors of these MacBooks, I would say, are a little bit better. So you may want to just wait out to see if you want to go and upgrade to those particular MacBooks, and I'll compare them a little bit throughout this video as well. But I was using the M1 MacBook Pro probably for all the year of 2021, I think a little bit in 2022 as well. And these MacBooks were very solid. Like, they were very, very good devices. And I really like these MacBooks a lot. They weren't perfect by any means, but I definitely did appreciate these MacBooks a lot, and I had a really good time with them. First of all, I was coming from a 2015 MacBook Pro before this one. So for several years, I was using all these older Intel type of MacBooks. And I heard a lot of people talking about the M models. I switched to a 16-inch, Intel MacBook Pro for a little bit, but that one was it wasn't great. It wasn't that good, and it wasn't worth the money. I switched over to my 2015 again, and then I contemplated up to the M1 MacBook Pro, and I bit the bullet, and I did end up buying it. And it was probably one of the best decisions technologically I've ever made. This M1 MacBook Pro was such a solid device. I loved this MacBook so much. And I was kind of afraid at the time switching over to this MacBook because my previous MacBook had a bunch of ports and everything. And when I switched over to the M1 MacBook Pro, I had to carry a dongle around, which I was kind of afraid for. I will tell you, I got used to it very, very quickly. So on the outside of this particular MacBook, you can see that at the very top, we have our standard Apple logo, silver type of, material. It's just a very premium feeling device, which is something that I actually like a lot about these particular Macs. And that's kind of it on the top. There's no Apple glowing logo anymore. It's a pretty, standard looking MacBook when it comes down to it. On the sides of it though, this is where everything kind of was, hit or miss for me. So we had, this particular MacBook, which had two USB Type-C ports. There were Thunderbolt ports, which was really cool. And the other side, you had a headphone jack. Now, when I first got this MacBook, I quickly kind of got used to carrying a dongle around. I kept a dongle inside of my book bag, and then in the morning, if I ever had to use it, I would just go and take it from my desk, and it was pretty good. And I had a dedicated one on my monitor, which I docked it up to, which is a pretty cool thing. But then I realized something. I realized that I couldn't do a dual monitor setup on these MacBooks. If you're getting the M1 MacBook Pro, my problem that I had with this MacBook was that I wasn't able to dock it to two different monitors at the same time. So you could either do one Thunderbolt monitor or one HDMI monitor, whichever way you wanted to set it up. So I was never able to do a dual monitor setup on this thing, and I couldn't daisy chain another monitor through it either. There were ways of kind of going around it, but I never was able to do it. It just seemed like such a crazy workaround. I didn't want to deal with it. But luckily for me, we did end up getting a macOS update, which gave us universal desktop mode, which allowed us basically to go ahead and essentially have, if we had another Apple product like a MacBook or an iMac or Mac Mini on the side, we can kind of drag and drop files and use one Magic Keyboard or one keyboard for two different Apple systems. And that's kind of what I did. It was a weird workaround, but I would essentially dock up my M1 MacBook Pro and then have my iMac right next to it, and then I could kind of use it as almost like a dual monitor setup. It was kind of better too because it was like having two monitors, but I was able to also use the power of my Intel iMac and just kind of throw some power into that stuff, and then just kind of do some other tasks and not have to use the power within my MacBook. So it was kind of cool, but other than that, that was probably the only issue I really had with this type of Mac. On the bottom side, not really too much else going on, just the standard screws and standard stuff that you normally have on this type of Mac. And overall, I would definitely tell you, with the exterior of this type of MacBook, it definitely is a very solid MacBook. It still feels very premium. The only things that you're missing out on this MacBook that the newest ones basically have are things like, the HDMI port and the SD card slot and different things like that. But beyond that, you're really not missing out on too much here. And it's about the same thing that you expect on really any other MacBook. Now, opening this MacBook up, this is the other very cool thing going on here. This was something that was very interesting, that was very different on this MacBook that the newer ones have. Basically, at this time, all the, MacBook Pros were basically still giving you those butterfly keyboards, which had very little travel, and they were just very, very limited keyboards, I would say. They were very strange. I was not a fan of those keyboards at that time, and definitely for a lot of people, I would probably argue, those are probably one of the weirder types of, keyboards that you could probably get. Well, guess what? Very shortly after, we did end up basically getting the Intel Mac. We did end up getting the M1 MacBook Pros, and these completely changed a lot of things that you'd probably expect on these types of MacBooks. The things that I actually liked a lot about these particular Macs was that you were actually getting a full-size keyboard now. So it wasn't like those other Macs where it was just you were getting a limited keyboard with limited travel. Now you were actually getting this keyboard that was giving you full-size, keyboard and they were removing the touch bar, and they were still keeping the touch bar. They did end up removing it on different models, but it was still a very cool thing that you were getting on this type of Mac, which I actually thought was very, very cool at the time. So this in and of itself was a very awesome thing going on for this particular MacBook at that moment, which again was a very cool thing. Now on the top side, you were still getting the touch bar. Since then, they've removed the touch bars in basically all the Macs out there, but still, it's a nice thing. If you want to throw a touch bar on this thing, you can, and it is still giving you that, which for some people might be a big pro, and that kind of like covers it up on the bottom side. On the top side, you are getting that display. Now, I still think the display on this particular MacBook is still very, very good. You could definitely get a very nice display on this thing, which again is a very nice touch. I like being able to buy these types of MacBooks because forever now, these MacBooks are still going to have excellent displays. In fact, you could probably pick up the 2012 MacBook Pro and still feel like you have a very good display on that particular Mac as well. So you can't really go wrong, I would say, with these types of devices because they're still going to hold up very, very well in a lot of different ways, especially from that particular, Mac build quality standpoint. So this in and of itself, once again, gets a thumbs up for me, and it is something that I like a lot about these particular devices. You're getting the webcam on this thing, and overall, even the trackpad at the bottom is very, very good, and definitely from the exterior, it got a thumbs up for me. I like this MacBook a lot, and it definitely got a thumbs up for me from that particular perspective. Now, the other thing is, kind of when it comes down to the whole entire performance aspect, and these M1 MacBooks had a very good amount of, power within them. I got the 16 gigabyte of RAM option with, I think, 1 terabyte of storage. And I will tell you, these types of MacBooks for a long period of time were so solid. I think these are like just very decent MacBooks that you can just buy, use for a long period of time, and then just upgrade to the next one. And I generally do think like if you're even like an insane power user on your Mac, you can't really go wrong with this thing. Like this is a very, very good, powerful MacBook, which is something I love having. And if I'm going to go ahead and buy a Mac, this is a very good option to go and, that I'd recommend people to buy. You have to remember with these types of devices, Apple's going through and they're going to go ahead and basically buy this type of Mac, and they're going to, make a really good, decent Mac for the first model generation. And because these were the first M series, Apple did a really good job from the performance side. I remember people comparing this thing even to like a Mac Pro at the time, the Intel one. Now, I don't think this thing was as fast as that one, but it's still a very, very good, fast performing MacBook, which is something I like a lot about these types of devices too. The battery life of my M1 Model 2 was really good. I got an excellent time with the performance of this phone at that time, or this MacBook at that time, and that was another really cool thing going on with it too. So at the end of the day, what I would definitely tell you, these M1 MacBook Pros were very solid. I think Apple did a really good job with these devices at that time, and I think that was a very important thing going on at that moment. Like if I'm going to go through and actually buy some sort of MacBook, this one was a very decent option, and I still think for a lot of people, it's still completely worth buying for sure. Again, it's not like a perfect device, but I do think probably for the average person, it's a very, very good option. And I do think probably, I can't really recommend too many other MacBooks that are better than this thing. Maybe like the M1, Pro MacBook, which is currently what I'm using. But I think this is a very solid option, and I'm still a big fan of this device when it comes down to it. So that pretty much covers it up there. If you have any other thoughts or questions, please let me know in the comment section below. The like button helps me so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.